we've been going live here on Sunday for the last, 2 months at this time. Well, today we have a pretty special treat. We're going to be talking with the gentleman you see here on screen, Jeff, and his dog, Zoey. And we're going to be talking a little bit about scent dogs, tracking dogs, cadaver dogs, kind of the typical behavior of these dogs, and also a little bit of some of Jeff's thoughts regarding, what the dogs were doing here regarding the Avery Dassey case and just some of his observations, obviously, as somebody who knows. So, a little bit late, buddy. Minute too late. Somebody getting that. So, obviously, I know you've had a little bit of an interest in this case. You've watched both documentaries. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. And then I know that, with Scooby's not with us here today, but, Scooby was a big part of introducing Jeff and I. But I know you and Scooby have been talking a lot about the dog tracks and a lot of these sort of things. So I obviously have some questions here today that we can go through and to hopefully give you a chance to hit many of the talking points you want to hit regarding this.
Okay.
You're concerned about, and that sort of thing. So obviously, I guess everybody would maybe like to meet Zoey at this point, I guess, before we get started, if possible.
There she is, sleeping.
There she is, laying down, relaxing.
Hey,
yeah?
Poochie.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, what's going on, Zoey?
Hello, Zoey. Oh,
say hello, Zoey.
Because I'm in your earbuds now, but
yeah, that's right. Well, there's proof I have a dog. So
okay, Travis is asking. This is a major concern for Travis over here in the live chat. He won't shut up about it. Does Zoey spell her name Zoe or Zoey?
With a Y.
With a Y. Okay.
Yeah. My last name is Young, so it has to have a Y on the end of Zoey, right?
Okay, there you go. Makes sense to me, man. Yeah. All right, so that was the first, burning question. Obviously, anyways. So, so I guess the first question we want to ask is number one, how long have you been in your current field of work working with tracking dogs and cadaver dogs and that sort of thing?
So about 17 years for for professional working dogs. I mean, before that, back in I think 1991, I was training hunting dogs. But then when I was a police officer, kind of transitioned over into the law enforcement world. And then after that, I went to Iraq and I was there as a security contractor. And then I ran a bomb dog in Iraq for a while. And so then I've been doing search and rescue for a couple of years now, doing this stuff. And I've got a 2-year-old Belgian Tervuren. If people are wondering what type dog this is. Most people know of the Malinois, which is the short hair, black face, tan body police dog that everybody sees. Well, right. Zoey is the long-haired version of that. And so my previous LE dog was the same exact thing, but a male. And great dogs, high drive, really strong bite. But Zoey's not trained to bite.
Right.
She doesn't do any kind of handler protection stuff at all, just so it's safer on a search that, she gets to the end of a search, she's not going to bite somebody, even if they're being aggressive to her, because sometimes we go after suicidal subjects, people who are not happy that they're being tracked down,
right?
Or dementia patients who might see a dog like mine and go, "Oh, a wolf," and
right.
We don't know what they're thinking, but she's not going to respond by turning around and biting the person. So
right.
Not trying to hurt him, we're trying to find him.
Right. That's game search and rescue.
So,
right.
Yeah. So she's a pretty high-end tracking dog. She's really, really good. I've tracked her in a way that we do in the law enforcement world, which is called track through drive. And that came from the Canadian RCMP. They started this way of tracking people where the dog is using both air scent, ground scent, everything that it can, and is moving as fast as the dog can track while pulling a fat handler like me behind it. Mm-hmm. So the dog is moving very, very fast. And the limitation on how fast we can go is how fast I can move behind the dog.
Right.
So, and it really, really increases the capture rate in the law enforcement world, and by closing what's called a time distance gap. So you have someone who runs away, then a dog shows up 15 minutes, could be a minute later, could be 20 minutes, 30 minutes later. Right. And then now you have to close that gap between the person running. And so if they go to ground, normal dogs that they'll see down, kind of sniff, 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 walking. If that person doesn't, that dog will never find them. So unless they hide, then that dog will find them. So from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they came up with this the track through drive method. And so that's what Zoe does. And she's really good at it. So last summer we had a track for a person who was off of their meds, had dementia, and was dying. And so they stopped taking their meds, and then they have a time clock starts going for like diabetes type 1 or whatnot. So this person made a choice. I'm going to go just walk it off until I die. And so we tracked that person for over 8 miles in a busy city with cars, with, coming right by us. We're going down the streets, going down sidewalks, and this guy was hiding in people's backyards and going through this whole thing. And then a big, huge lightning storm came up at the very end near 8 miles. And so we had to stop. And then the police used the fact that Zoe was going this way and then was going in a straight angle. And like a couple blocks down is where he was dead in the trees. So they never would have found him until someone smelled the body long time down the road, if it wouldn't have been for her. And then we've done a little over 13 miles in kind of like a little bit of a suburban kind of a, dirt roads, concrete roads, asphalt, really hot. And for the urban one we were talking about before, that was 38 hours after the guy had walked down the road. So we tracked 38 hours after that.
After he'd walked.
And then the 13-mile one was a little over a week. And so, then we did one where it was 8 days later, and it had rained for 3 days and had snowed about 4 inches, and then the snow melted. And we were still able to do about a 4-mile track on that guy. She's a really high-end tracking dog. And that's what I started her off as, was primarily a tracking dog until we started introducing her to human remains. And some dogs get it. Some dogs love it. Some dogs are scared of it. And so Zoe, she just eats it up. So after doing training with my team, Utah Search Dogs, I then took her to a place called FACS, which is the Forensic Anthropology Center of Texas State University down in San Marcos, Texas, where they have the world's largest body farm. And they have bodies decomping or decomposing in different stages all throughout this area. And we get to go there. We get to train, which is a really honor to be able to do that. And people dedicate their lives and their body to assisting us trying to recover other people. So there's a lot of appreciation there for these people that donate their bodies. But an individual named Ben Alexander, who's a doctor down there, he's a really good high-end dog handler, and he's the one who works there and pushed this program so that we could train our dogs there. So that was last year. And then this year I went down there for an advanced cadaver course with Zoe. And we did stuff like you wouldn't believe, like putting her on the front of a boat and then driving the boat around in a lake and then finding a leg that was submerged 30 feet deep.
30 feet?
30 feet deep.
Wow.
And then there was a forearm of an older lady that was submerged in about 20 feet. But that was about 50 feet from the shore, and we found it from the shore. So
we found it from the shore.
From the shore.
Yeah.
So there's some pretty cool stuff going on when you start talking about cadaver dogs and the whole science behind, the dog's ability to be able to do this stuff. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, there are people out there who are much more experienced than I am in this stuff. Just like anything, there are people out there who have a wealth of knowledge. But sometimes what they don't bring to the table, though, is the law enforcement kind of perspective. I'm also a licensed private investigator in the state of Utah. So I being an investigator kind of has followed me through from my police world. So they don't have that. So they don't tend to look at a dog's track or an HR kind of a situation, human remains detection situation like a cop would. So little issues with that.
Gives you a little edge, right? It gives you a bit of an edge. Yeah.
And then also, I own a company called Utah Tactical Coaching, and I teach long range shooting. I teach, everything basically you can do with handguns or rifles, carbines, or whatnot. But then I also teach visual tracking. And so visual tracking is when a human uses his eyeballs and tracks, human spoor or little disturbances and things through multiple kinds of terrain to find someone. Now, that's a very slow, methodical way of tracking. But one thing that I'm trying to bring to the canine world is combining that visual tracking skill with an olfactory asset like a dog. So now you're tracking as fast as a dog, but then when you find a really nice track, you can forensically look at that track and document it and then prove that you are actually tracking that person due to the stride, the size, the type of footwear, the angle of the foot, all these different things that you can then document. And when we were tracking that guy for 8 miles in the city, there were 3 different places where I could look at the track that I found and go, Zoe is right. She's still tracking the same exact person. And then that's what gives law enforcement a better feel or more confidence in what I'm trying to tell them, that this guy did go this way. I'm not just going, yeah, because my dog told me. I'm like, I saw the footprint. I saw it here, and this is where it is here. And so you're taking 2 different things and you're making it a lot better.
Let me ask you, I'm curious about that guy in the city there. Because you're saying that Zoe actually did start out as a scenting dog and then moved into human remains detection, right?
Well, tracking dog, and then HR. Now she does both.
Right. I'm sorry, tracking dog. So she now is doing both. So in that process of tracking that gentleman down, was Zoe likely responding to necrotic flesh, or was she most likely scenting a trail until she got close to him?
Yeah. So she's a scent discrimination dog, meaning that I could take her, have her smell you, and then, or a scent article from you, and then send you through the mall. You go through the parking lot, go into a different store, and she will track your specific scent through all of that area, through all those people, and then come up and put her nose on you.
Right.
And so she's tracking a specific, scent, the raft particles that come from your body as you walk or as you're sitting there, you're just sloughing these things off. Right. She's specifically looking for that scent. And the cool thing is you can see how the predominant wind flow in the areas that we track through affects where the dog actually is cruising along at. Say there's a sidewalk on the right and the predominant wind is coming from the right. She's going to be over in the left, probably 6 feet to 10 feet, because that's where all that stuff is migrated, depending on how much time has passed.
Right.
Now, if rain comes in, it'll take those raft particles and it'll push them over into the gutter.
Right.
So now she'll be nose gutter as we're going. A cool thing, but that's the. Whoops! Did you lose me?
No, we're here. We're good.
Okay. All right. So my screen just started going. The circle of death there.
You did pause up at one point, but it repaired itself quickly. So I mean,
I must have been talking too fast. But I'm also part of a statewide search and rescue, canine search and rescue organization called Utah Search Dogs. And so I'm the vice president of that, and I'm also the public affairs guy for that. And what we do is we offer our services free of charge, statewide. So we will go anywhere in the state. Most search and rescue organizations are county specific. We go anywhere in the state, and we also go into the neighboring states too to help them out. We were in Idaho last year. We were in Nevada, out near Reno, almost to California last year. So we do all this out of our own pocket. We take donations. We're a charitable organization. So if anybody wants to give any money, Utah Search Dogs on Facebook, you can click on that stuff. You can sign up on Amazon and do our Smile donation thing where a little bit of your purchase goes to that. So
there you go, folks.
When you're buying toilet paper, you can send us a nickel. So it all adds up. It all helps. So
there you go. Looks like Scooby is joining us here. Hold on.
Oh, Scooby.
Hello, Scooby.
Scooby. Hi.
You're upside down.
Upside down, really? It's not. Really? She's right side up for me.
She's upside down for me.
Let me see how she looks on YouTube here, real quick.
Good. I have the red wall. The red wall was always popular in the past, but I haven't done this in a while, so hopefully, my setup is okay.
Yes, it looks fine.
That Easter lily. And I got the festive.
And you're right side up on YouTube. So there we go.
Just for me.
Just Jeff gets to look at you upside down. So
It's
I don't know why that is.
Kind of,
But anyway.
just dangling right there upside down. It's kind of funny.
Oh well.
That's okay.
So we were just talking about some of the work that Jeff and Zoe do, and some of Jeff's qualifications there, Scooby. So just so you know where we're at.
Oh, are we live now?
We are live.
Uh-oh.
We've been live. We've been live since 1. Well, for about 17 minutes anyway.
That was a little late. That's okay. Well, carry on.
Right.
I'm not going to be saying much
So,
here.
So I guess let's move on to question 2, I guess, and talk about I guess you've been talking about it, but I guess we can go over again. What kind of dogs have you kind of worked with during your span in this field of work?
So start off with tracking, law enforcement tracking, patrol, patrol dogs, which are ones that train to bite, handler protection kind of stuff, and then narcotics, and then explosives detection in Iraq. And then Zoe actually does explosives detection now too. So one of the things I've trained her to do is I work at a ski resort when I'm not laid off for this coronavirus.
Right.
But when I used to be a professional ski patroller, and now I'm a risk manager of the largest ski resort in North America. And we do a lot of stuff called avalanche mitigation, where we go out and throw explosives to blow up avalanches and cause them to slide before a customer does. And so sometimes these explosives don't go off. And now the ATF doesn't really like, just letting one of these things.
Right. Yeah.
Normally it takes hours and hours and hours for somebody to dig it out, try to figure out where it's at in the avalanche. Because if you're putting a bomb out to blow up an avalanche, it's not safe to go out there and dig for the bomb, right?
Right.
So you're actually blowing it down into, with everything else, all the snow goes down to the bottom.
Right.
So, so she's been trained to smell the specific source of pentolite, which is the type of explosives that we use in our cast boosters to blow those up. So, so she's available to do that too. Yeah, which is really unique. So, but it makes it a little difficult when I fly with her because I deal with explosives. I'm an explosives handler for the ATF,
right?
And so I've got that scent all over me because of that. All my gear's got a little bit on there because we use that to train her to find it. And so when I flew to Texas in March, of course they did the swab, and I was like, "Ooh, wait a minute, that's gonna pop hot." Let me just tell you right now, your little machine's gonna start flashing because here's my stuff, and I pull out my paperwork for the ATF and go, "Here you go," and then it pops hot, starts screaming, and they're like, "Yeah, it's okay, go ahead." And
but they probably wouldn't be okay. Go ahead if you didn't show them the paperwork. I'm sure they'd probably have a wholly different reaction.
That's why I carry it. So,
sir, why do you have explosives on your attire?
Just a thing to have, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's funny.
That's funny. So I wanted to talk a little bit because I remember when we were talking about this a bit once. You were talking about the way Zoe alerts,
right?
And in terms of with human cremains or remains, and in terms of with volatile substances or explosive substances, if you don't mind.
Okay, so Zoe has a passive alert, and so there's an indication, a trained final response. So that's what we're trying to get, a trained final response, meaning that the dog goes 100%. What you told me to look for is right there. And so what she'll do is she will nose the source, and she'll put her nose on it, and then she'll lay down, and then she'll look at me like, "Hey, Daddy, I found it." Because what she's waiting for is for me to give her tug toy. So with her tug toy, that's her thing. That's her reward. That's all that she wants is tug, and to play and to fight with that. So and to play a little fetch.
Right.
And so, so she does that passive kind of alert where she'll lay down, which is plats. So she'll lay down, and then if I'm too far away from the source, so let's say that she's running around and she's 100 or 200 yards away from me, she will plats, and she'll look and turn and see how far I am. Then she'll do what's called a recall refine. So she will get up, she'll run back to me, and she'll jump on me. She'll like hit me, and go, "Hey!" And then she'll turn around, looking over her shoulder, and go, "Follow me." And then I'll run with her, all excited. and then she'll take me right to where it's at, and then she'll go and she'll lay down again. And then if it's not obvious, then what I can do is I can do a thing where I detail her and I go, show me. So she's already in her trained final response. I say, show me. And she will specifically put her nose
on it,
right on it.
Oh,
like
okay.
If it's buried, she'll put her nose right where the most scent is coming from, which is a little confusing when it's a full-size body under the ground. So she'll sniff around and it's kind of like, okay. And then she'll try to pick a spot, which is the strongest scent. But if it's a small little thing, she'll put her nose right on it. If it's under the snow, if it's doing avalanche work or nothing like that, she'll do the same exact thing. She'll put her nose right on it.
Right. So it's more of a she like kind of like lays down kind of with her legs underneath her. Yeah. And just kind of poised. There. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then what does she do when she senses like an explosive? Same exact thing. So I don't want her. Same thing. So but the thing is so she's been proofed against human remains and then also for explosives. So what I can do is I can take an explosive and sit it in bury it in the snow. And then I can take human remains, bury them in the snow. And I'll give her a command for the explosives. She'll ignore the human remains and go for the explosives. And then if I bring her back and tell her, human remains, she'll ignore the explosives and go right through it. If I put a couple of them out there, we can play a game where I send her to like human remains and she'll just go right through the explosives and go right to that. Yeah. So, so it's pretty cool. I remember you showed me a picture, and I don't know if you noticed this or not. But I remember you showing me a picture of her alerting on some remains, and then a picture of her alerting on something that was like a explosive substance or whatever. And I just noticed that it seemed like when she was responding to human remains, she has more of a gentler, kind of a sympathetic, kind of a bow, kind of an attitude to it. Whereas it seemed to me in the picture with the explosives, she had a more of an like attentive, ears straight up, like I'm aware I'm dealing with something dangerous kind of thing. Yeah, she knows the difference. She can tell, and I can usually just by her posture, if she was to go down and do that. Now, her trained final response is the lay down nose on source, right? But when she gets there. There's a little bit of difference where with human remains, she'll just plop right down and go, hey, this is it, Right. With explosives, she'll be like, oh, there it is. Yeah. And then a lot of times she'll put her feet down and then her butt will be sticking up in the air for a while. And then she'll come down. It's all about knowing your dog. That's interesting. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of hard. It's kind of neat that you were able to notice that between the pictures. But yeah, it stuck out to me because it's like she was almost being sympathetic and wanting to lay with the remains in the picture you showed, and then the one with the explosive. I mean, ears straight up, everything. I mean, it was like all alert. Everything about her said alert. So Linda asked a question real quick about how old Zoe is, and she's 2 years old. And Zoe. And so I got Zoe from a breeder in Springfield, Missouri, and it was a True Night Tavurans. True Night Tavurans is the breeder. And so I flew out there when she was like 10 weeks old and then picked her up, flew her back. And then her training started right there, right then and there. We train just about every single day. I carry human remains around in my truck with explosives, and we do this stuff every day. Sometimes it's a lot more. Sometimes it's a lot more involved, but we at least do stuff, at least every day to keep her in practice. It's just kind of keep her head in the game because this is what she's a working dog. She's not a pet. She kind of acts like a pet sometimes, but in reality, she's a working dog. And when I say let's go to work, I mean she's all business. She rides in my vehicle. She has my vehicle set up so I open my rear back door, and she jumps right into her kennel, and that's where she stays. If I'm out from the house, she comes with me. No matter what. I mean, that's where she lives at. When I'm out, she's out. Because sometimes we'll get called to a live find search where we're looking for someone who's, there's a time clock that's set. So the kid went missing. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we went for a kid who had run away from one of these correction camps where they send their kid out to these camps that then put them in the wild and make them rough it for a couple of weeks to kind of get them back on track or whatnot. And the kid ran, he spent the night and then they woke up in the morning and he was gone.
And so, yeah, so and it's snowy and it's kind of cold. And so there's a
Right.
time clock. And so from wherever I'm at, I need to be able to respond. And that's why she's always with me.
Right.
So, yeah.
That kind of leads me into the next question. Talking about Zoey is,
Mhm.
you know, what's Zoey like when she isn't working, and essentially when she does have the ability to play. And
Well,
have fun?
she's usually like right next to me, like she is right
Yeah.
now. I'm reaching down and
Mhm.
petting her, and
Mhm.
she'll either be napping or just watching me. So she
Yeah.
just kind of is neurotic about it. She's a high activity dog, a high drive dog, and it's kind
Okay.
of like watching a spring that's been compressed,
Right.
just sitting there, you know, because she wants to bounce.
Right.
And but she controls herself, and she's not.
Okay.
She doesn't chew on things. She doesn't. You know, that's just all the proper, you know, raising of a dog.
Right.
And if people are looking for like, how do I do this with my dog? How do I train my dog to be a working dog? There is a website from a guy in Wisconsin, and it's called Leerburg.com, Leerburg.com. And they have hundreds and hundreds of free articles on how to raise a dog. And, you
Right.
know, it'll probably give you a different perspective on things. And then it goes all the way up into police work and tracking and all that stuff.
Mhm.
That's where I send a lot of people for info. Just a wealth
But
of knowledge.
obviously, she does have her little toy Tug you were talking about that she likes to play fetch with.
She's got to earn that, though.
But she has to earn that one, right? Yeah.
She's got to earn it. And so to actually tug and fight, she's got to find something. So what
Right.
I'm trying to do is I'm trying to always relate having fun with doing work for me. And then the two come together. And then she's like, I understand. Everything's kumbaya in life. I know what I'm doing.
Right.
And they kind of
Right.
realize that. And she'll tell me, hey, I want to go play. And it's like, okay, then I'll go put something out in my yard or one of the tree lines around.
Oh,
And then
okay.
she'll go find it. And then we get to play.
Okay, I
So,
see. That's cool.
yeah.
That is cool. All right. Well,
Yeah.
so she gets to play a fair bit, seeing as you are doing it every day.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're carrying it around with you, so you can do it every day. So there you go. Right on.
Mhm. Yep.
So, well, good for Zoey. So, and then I think you just covered that. So she pretty much knows when it's work time. She's all business.
All business. Yeah.
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 So that's
And
cool.
some dogs, you know, are reactionary dogs. They're sensitive to other dogs being around. They'll attack other dogs. They'll start barking. They just won't leave the other dogs alone. And Zoe's not like that. She's been attacked a few times by other dogs that are on search and rescue. And sometimes other handlers let their dogs get loose, and those dogs are reactive. And she's been hit a few times. Nothing serious that had to be medical attention, but it's enough to emotionally give her some respect for other dogs. So when there's another dog around, she'll be like, okay, there it is. Now I'm going to do my work. And I mean, just the other day we go to dog parks and we'll do our, you know, scent detection work right outside of a dog park. So there's all these dogs right there, and she's got to, you know, put her nose down. She's got to work through it.
Right.
And,
Okay.
Just a good way to make them focus on it.
So I know the answer to this one, but since it was asked, will a cadaver dog alert on remains or blood?
That's what a cadaver dog does. A cadaver dog is trained to find what's called VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And that's from the decomposition process the body goes through. Blood is part of that. Now, personally, I don't do urine. I don't do feces, because both of those, you know, people let that go out of their body and not be dead. So I don't want my dog to be sniffing and trying to give me an indication on something that someone peed over here.
Right.
You know, I'm looking for something very specific, which is, you know, dead human remains.
Right.
And not just dead remains, but human remains. And so she's been trained to not care about like animal carcasses. You could take a finger bone and put it in the carcass of a dead deer, and she will tell you that there's human remains there. But if it's not there, she's not going to indicate on it. She won't care. She doesn't chew on other bones. She will sometimes, you know, lick a dead person. So she likes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it's one of those.
It doesn't surprise me. Dogs are that way, you know.
Yeah.
I've seen dogs eating poop before, so I mean, you know. Anyway.
Yeah.
That is a thing.
Yep. It's
Scooby, you had something to say?
Oh yeah, I didn't want to just I don't know if I'm allowed to ask questions, but kind of on the topic. Is there,
Sure.
would you say, General Jeff, a minimum like amount of blood that Zoe or a dog like her would need just so to
No, you can
color?
bleed, and then you can clean it out. and the dog will usually still show you where that blood was.
Oh, wow.
Cleaned up.
Oh yeah. And so this comes back to the Armchair Detective, where I did a couple shows with him, and we're talking about the Watts case over in Colorado.
Right.
And then he had a handler on dealing with some stuff over in England, because he's an English guy, and nice chap. And there was one of his dogs indicated behind a sofa where somebody had bled behind the sofa. Now, can you say that blood came from a dead person, or it came from the individual that you think it might have come from? No, It could have been someone who was hanging up a blind and then cut their finger and a little drop of blood. There you go.
Right.
So it's a little difficult when it comes to that. That's why I always want my dog to show me exactly where the source is. Right. And when we start talking about the vehicle that I think it was Brutus put his nose underneath the tarp and then supposedly alerted. For Zoe, she just would have got excited and told me that she wants to search more. I would have had to have pulled her back and then allowed her to do a detailed search before she gave me a final trained response of where it actually is in that vehicle. Like, she would be on the crease of a door if it's on the other side of that. But if she's at the back of the car, she's not going to indicate there, because she'll search the whole thing and then go, oh. Now, right back here where I initially first caught it, that was the strongest, and that's where I'm going to give my trained final response.
Right.
And so,
into that,
but she's going to get excited. Go ahead, Scooby.
Oh, I was going to say, we'll probably get into this later, maybe about the RAV and the search and the issue.
Yeah.
The next question is about Avery.
At the time, okay. Then we'll get into that.
Yeah. And so Linda asked a question: could a dog go through the Averys like they did in 06? Could they do that now? Barring any private property issues, if we're just talking about, hey, we're allowed to go there and we're allowed to search, yeah, we could. Will the dog indicate on human remains? Absolutely. My dog does 100-year-old graves where, there's people that have been buried underground for a long, long time. And it was before the age of the embalming. And they're 6 feet deep. And she'll tell me right where those are at. In Texas, we got to do training on what's called green graves, where there's a cemetery that is putting people in the ground currently with no casket, with just like a shroud, no embalming, no nothing. It's not allowed. And then they'll bury them as deep as the rocks allow, which sometimes is not very deep. And we're finding miscarriages that people go out and bury. And so you start thinking about the small source and the depth and the rocky ground.
Right.
It's amazing what these dogs can do. Yeah, I'm just the guy who feeds Zoe. I mean, Zoe is the star of the show, and I'm just the one hanging on the line trying to keep up with her.
Right.
Yeah, and there's other dogs that are just as good as her. There are some dogs that will get to a place and indicate faster than her. She's a little anal when it comes to wanting to show me, and she has to convince herself that is exactly what I'm looking for. And then she'll give her trained final response. Some dogs just go, I smell it. Boom, there you go.
Yeah, right.
Just depends on the handler and how the handler's training the dog.
Right. Okay. All right. So the next question, we're going to start talking about Avery a little bit here. So in the Avery case, it is said that Avery killed and mutilated Teresa Hallbach. He then drove her vehicle across the property to the opposite side of the property. If this is true, why do we see these dogs, or in your opinion, why do we see these dogs showing almost no interest in the Avery property? Okay,
so I've read the reports. I've read the dog, the police dog reports and the search reports and stuff. There just seems to be a missing methodical canine HR search of the actual residence, the insides of the residence, and then where the back was, where Bear, the big German Shepherd, was tied up. There just seems to be a missing kind of seriousness in how the dogs were used. The dog went from I think it was Loof, went from the vehicle that she was there apparently taking photos of, went over to a black F-350 or F-150 pickup truck, got interest on both doors. Yeah. And then what happened then? Did they open the doors and let the dog go in and say, why are you interested? No, they just let the dog continue. So for me, when a dog shows interest like that and it's like, hey, I'm showing interest on both doors, full stop. We got to figure out why my dog is interested. I want to open the doors. I want to let my dog in and see what the dog's going to tell me. Then the dog, I mean, and who knows if the dog got frustrated at that point and was like, okay, well, obviously you don't want what I'm showing you. Let's just walk over here. I'm going to go sniff this door. I don't know. I'm showing interest. If they don't open the door and let the dog go in and say, why are you interested? Or if the scent is that strong, and the dog's not giving a final train response, it could just be that it's not strong enough for the dog to go, I'm close enough to then give my train final response. Right. Some dogs got to be right there. Like if there's something up in a tree, we do elevated stuff, like raised off the ground and shelves, on top of cars, in trees. And Zoey will climb the tree as much as she can and get her nose up in there and then go, okay. And then she'll lay right down looking at it. And then when I say, show me, she will stand up on her back feet and then go, it's up there. I can't get it, but I can. It's there someplace.
Just pointing your nose towards it.
Right, right up there. It's called a hit, right?
Right.
And that's what these dogs should be doing. And the handler should be keyed in enough to go, hey, look, my dog's showing interest in here. Let's back off. Let's get access to this building and let's go search it. Let's go search the inside of this building and see what's what. Right. The fact that bear was behind the vehicle, behind the residence and left there for days, and that the cops were feeding this thing and neighbor dogs. And I mean, it's just kind of one of these things where if I have a crime scene, I'm shutting it down. There's no access. I'm shutting it down completely. And I'm removing any kind of distraction before the dog even gets there. So that dog would have been on the end of a metal pole with the wire, and then it would have been stuck in someone's car, or if they had a dog catcher, the dog catcher would have taken it away. If there's nobody to take the dog. So that would have been removed, or should have been removed, before the police canines were introduced to the area. Because that's also a hazard. What if that dog breaks loose and hurts your $15,000 dog? I mean, right. It's just a risk you don't want to take.
Yeah, doesn't it seem odd that those dogs, and not just bear, but other, because they always mention dogs plural, where they're on the property while they're doing all this searching, and not only did they not try to remove them, but they were feeding them and taking care of them.
Yeah, and so you'll see junkyards a lot use dogs that roam randomly through the area, and they bark at people who pull up. In case you get someone who walks in during the day and says, oh, there's a nice car part that I want, but I don't want to pay for it. Then they come back at nighttime with a wrench. So it's kind of normal to have free roaming dogs in the junkyard kind of a setting, especially if there's vehicles involved. It doesn't surprise me that there would be like loose dogs running around, but that's just something that should have been documented. And they should have said why they didn't do that. I just don't get it. There's a lot of things with this case that I just shake my head and I go, I don't know of any other law enforcement agency that would have allowed some of this stuff to happen, without the documentation that is necessary to defend this in court.
Right.
Well, that's why it's great to have your opinion with your law enforcement background as well as your dog handling background, because that's what, I and a lot of us would think logically, but you can also say that from, even a professional perspective, that this is sort of, not the ideal way things would be done.
Yep. There's a right way and a wrong way, right?
Yeah.
And then you have this other way over here that they're doing, which is like,
yeah. So that's great that you can confirm that for us.
Yep.
Because,
and let me just put this out there, right? Just like I say, there's people out here that are much more knowledgeable than I am with everything in life, right? Mm-hmm. No one's ever the top of the thing,
right?
But, I mean, let's just move on. Well, let me just say it. So I'm also not here to badmouth other canine handlers.
Sure.
I don't know their dog. I don't know how their dog was trained. I don't know, what if the person's dog is doing really good work, and yet the officer's ability to put that representation of the dog's work on paper is what sucks. Yeah. Something's amiss. But I'm not going to sit here and go, that dog is horrible. That handler's horrible. Not going to say that because I just can't. I wasn't there. I don't know if they were told not to say certain things. If we don't know.
Right.
But so I can give my opinion as an outside person looking in and go, I mean, this is not how I would have done it. I've never seen it done this way, and kind of give some opinions about why they might have done that way. But I'm not here to badmouth other handlers.
Sure.
And,
I understand.
and I just got to say that. I did that with the Watts case too. Although, I mean, if you ever watched the video we reviewed for the Watts case, it's just like, oh my God, you know? Yeah. And I had people from that lady's team calling, you know, messaging me and stuff, and
Right.
it's all good.
Right on.
Emotion surrounding that case, that with that particular show. So I guess you got caught up in some of that apparently.
Yeah. And so real quick, there's let me see if I can say this name. Big Ragu Blair? Big Ragu?
Big Ragu, yeah.
Big Ragu. Okay. Did Jeff say a dog got sent on the F-150 at one point? Yep. In the report, it says that the dog left the vehicle that they were taking photos of to sell and went over to the F-150. It was a black F-150 or F-350, doesn't matter, and went up to both doors and showed interest. And at that point, the handler doesn't document anything that happened after that point, and they just move on to the building where the dog goes over and shows interest on the main door, and then on the side door, there's just there's no explanation about that. About, well, what did you do to introduce your dog closer to the source that could have been there? Right. There's just nothing.
No follow-up on the interest.
No follow-up. There's no mention of weather on these reports either, and that's an issue too. Is I need to know to look at this stuff, and in court they should have been raked right over the coals.
Over the coals, right?
For what was from the time that she was suspected to be missing, the time last seen, what's the weather been like? Every single day, how's the weather been? Has there been rain? Has there been anything throughout that to affect the dog track? And then at the time of the dog track, what is it right then and there? Where's the wind blowing from? Because I see these reports and it's like, yeah, I got some interest over here and this area over here, this berm. Well, what direction is the wind blowing from? Because that's going to be where your source is coming from. So all these things are missing that, you know, I just don't know if these people don't deal with stuff like this a lot, and so they're over their head. I hate to say that, because the Loof's handler, what's her name, Sarah? Yes. She wrote a good report. She just left out the environmentals and explanations and things about why, you know, my dog wants to go right up to where these two deputies are at a cul-de-sac. And they've got crime scene tape up, and my dog is not allowed to follow the track into that crime scene and indicate on what these guys obviously have got roped off. To me, that's huge. I mean, I don't see anywhere where it's documented about why they were there, why they were actually kept out, and it's just suspicious. Yeah, the lack of information, the lack of dedication to every step of the way. We're going to document what we're doing and why. That's huge. That's huge.
Absolutely.
They don't have a lot of murders up there for sure. I think Manitowoc County has like one murder a year, but I don't know, missing person. So, you know, they probably don't have a lot of experience in that type of a situation, but
right. Yeah. And well, that's something Steve Moore points out about this too. He's like you, Jeff. The way you're saying, I don't want to necessarily be talking crap on all these handlers. He's the same way when he's talking about Wiegert and Fassbender. He's like, I don't want to say that these guys are complete idiots. Look, they probably are very good at doing some things and, you know, type of thing. So, I mean, but he's ultimately coming back to, but there's problems here. You know, he's like, but there's problems. So, I mean, it's very, very, it's a very common complaint made across the Avery Dassey cases. So. But the diplomacy is, you're not alone in it. So,
well, and I don't suffer from the blue line syndrome too, where I'm like, hey, I was a cop. I mean, my brother's a retired cop. I mean, I'm not like, you know, there's you and then there's cops and it's us against you guys. I mean, I saw that so much as a police officer that it just disgusted me. And I've been around a lot of corrupt cops, and I've seen people get really screwed over. And and I've been involved with federal lawsuits testifying against cops who were doing things completely wrong and trying to screw innocent people for a personal vendetta.
Well, so that's good.
I mean, I've taken it to that level. So you need to know that. So I'm not trying to protect these guys. I'm just saying, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't get put on paper that affects the handler. And, you know, having a flanker, having somebody that's with you, that's taking notes. and I usually do as much as I possibly can have somebody behind me, and I'm like, hey, write this address down. My dog just showed interest in this car or this backyard.
Right.
We need, in case something happens, we need to have that documented that my dog did this.
Right.
And so having that secondary person to do that allows you to remember all that, so that your report at the end is everything's
accurate.
Within four corners of that document.
Sure.
And it reads better 15 years later when people are critiquing it. So
right. Like now.
I bet these people are like going, shh.
Yeah, I wish I would have taken a little more time on that report. Dang it.
Oh man, I knew I should have put the weather down. So, yeah. It's one of those things. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so now we're going to get to what a lot of people here are wanting to talk about. The Cuss Road cul-de-sac. So, do you have any opinions regarding the amount of law enforcement activity, number one, on the Cuss Road cul-de-sac, which we have really very little documentation of, and the fact that the dog tracks were so often leading to there or starting from there?
Yeah. So if I had to just write right now what I thought happened, okay, and with not holding anybody's feelings back or trying to play favorites. So,
hey, Zoe.
Hey, not trying to play favorites or anything like that. But what I would say is that Ryan, I'd be investigating that guy. Yeah. Ryan definitely needed to be looked at. He wasn't. Why? Why was he allowed to be involved in the search and get inside the houses and have such close contact when it's obvious that, whenever you have something like this happen, who do you look at first? You look at the people who are connected financially, emotionally, family members, things like that. And then here he is, who's had like a violent past with her, with current threats going on. Dude, red flags. Right.
Yeah.
So to me, that just kind of sets the stage for the whole thing, where if it was this guy, I'm not saying he is, talk to my lawyer. But what I'm saying is if it was somebody like him named Ryan, and then he wanted to do this, he had a perfect opportunity, knowing that with Avery's interaction with the police in the past and the ongoing lawsuit, that this is ripe for framing the guy. And so I would have waited for her to, down the road where she had left that place, and I'd say, hey, what's up? Come over here. Kill her, and then bring her back into there and try to hide stuff and try to plant things so that it looks like, hey, this is the guy.
So and anybody in the area would know they could easily exploit the law enforcement there to think it's Avery. They only needed a slight hint of a breath to push them over in that direction. So I mean,
in first opinions or first contacts with people, you make an opinion really quick. It's hard to change that first opinion, right? So you get law enforcement who then says, "Ooh, a murder against a guy we don't like," and who's suing us, and so we're going to lose a lot of stuff because of this guy. And now we can tie these two together. They become emotionally connected to that theory.
Right.
And they turn that theory into motive and all this
narrative. Yeah.
And then they refuse to look at anything else that might point the other way.
Exactly.
And that's where injustice is done. And it needed to be a clean slate. Everybody involved in that original case needed to be removed from having any fingerprints on this thing whatsoever. And it wasn't. And so
it's bad.
That's super concerning.
Not only do you have Ryan involved in the searches, Jeff, but you have him moving into Teresa's house.
Mm-hmm. They weren't even together
when she comes up missing. He moves in.
They weren't together.
They weren't. She was. No. There's lots of evidence to show in her emails and stuff that she was getting creeped out by him and that he wasn't getting the message. That she actually canceled doing a photo shoot of a wedding because he was in the wedding party. Yeah. So that tells us
this guy. So this tells you something, right? So I was a military interrogator, and then I was a police interrogator too. So you start looking at the way people act, and I've watched the videos of him and how he talks and his body language and stuff. And think about this: you have a guy who is harassing this girl. She goes missing, and then he moves into her place. He's not worried about her coming back and finding him in her bed in the middle of the night, because he knows that she's not coming back because he killed it. Talk to him.
I mean, he's living there with her, but
you know what I'm saying?
But
just
it's true.
saying.
It's true. I
Yeah.
mean, he did move in with her roommate, which was his friend, his best friend at the time. But
And
it's
they're
just
just
the
friends.
timing of it is odd. I mean, Ryan had to have had his own place to live prior
Before
to
that.
that day. So
Yeah.
it's like odd that he would move in. So I mean, it's strange.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah, crazy.
Scooby. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Oh no, that's okay. I was just
Mhm.
kind of,
I'm just reading these things over here on the
along
side.
with how
Oh, no
ridiculous
worries. Yeah.
that whole thing was. I was just laughing along with how ridiculous that whole situation was, that you think of. And Jeff, even every time we go through this, some little teeny thing pops out, like what Jeff said, because we're looking at it in retrospect, but what you pointed out is, yeah, she technically was a missing person at that time. So
She could have come home.
right, you could have gone home.
Would she have been
Yeah,
happy? No.
and he's going through her underwear and all over her computer, and
He was that
Yeah.
comfortable knowing that she's not coming home, that he would do that. And that to me is a huge red flag. Huge.
And what did
Yeah.
Scott think about that? Scott, who, and of course, well, I thought too, what was on the stand was just telling when, she had some liaisons, we could say, with the roommate, the friend roommate, her roommate.
Which she regretted, but yeah.
But I'm sure that drove Ryan crazy.
I'm sure, yeah.
Wait, on the stand, he said they're just friends. You could just tell that he was just all, at least to me, all like bottled up, like just friends. It's just like
yeah. And we know he knew different, so that was actually perjury. So, but it's a minor point. I'm sure nobody was going to push that point of perjury with him, but technically he knew about Scott. So saying that was dishonest. But anyway, so. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I almost wonder if he was trying to say that to himself almost. But again, it doesn't really matter.
Well, we also have him erase,
No,
it would appear he or somebody else erased voicemail messages from Teresa's phone. There's that little tidbit that's in the mix. We can't really prove it was him, but we know there's two missing. And he was able to, it was him and Teresa's sisters that were able to guess her account password and stuff, so that they were able to print up her phone records the day Sheriff Poggle and Mark Wiegert came to Teresa's house. So we know it was him and her sisters that were able to do that and get into her account. So we have her brother Mike Hallbach, who said he accessed her voicemails and listened to them, but he testifies that he didn't erase any. So we have this weird stuff going on with her phone and her voicemails that we don't have proper explanation of.
Yeah.
And
the brother's acting suspicious, and I don't know why. So
I'm glad you think so, because I do.
It just doesn't make sense.
Do. My good friend called Paul Capaldi in Scotland, Jeff, there's lots of things that rub him wrong about Mike Hallbach. He doesn't like the fact that once Mike Hallbach once uttered these words. He said, we just want to get this, we just want to come to, we just want to find her or something, or we just want to find out what happened. The grieving process could take days or months. What? So number one, he's assuming she's dead while she's missing. Yeah. And number two, he's offering the thought that the grieving process could take days.
Oh my God, a couple days.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, my friend Paul in Scotland has great, conflict with Mike's statement there. And I understand why he does. Yep. Sorry, Scooby, go ahead.
No, and then the memorial service before the blood was even technically identified as belonging to Teresa Hallbach. That was also.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues that Scooby and I talked about, reference the DNA and the testing, and then the timing of certain things, and then the lack of testing in others. To me, that's just super concerning too, because a lot of this would have been handled, especially knowing Avery's history with the court, that you want this to be an airtight case. They didn't care about it. They didn't care. And it's just surprising that they got a conviction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is, but yeah, anyway, and for me, it comes down to a lot of things. Number one, the state has unlimited resources.
It's true.
Which is something, and I think in this case, it particularly works against Avery, because when we look at the issue of the Veely CD, You know, this is an issue I have with the justice system, where how can a defendant possibly come up with enough resources to match the state? So to me, it's important that any expert that the state is employing, those results should be shared with the defense. Hands down, there should be no question about this.
Yeah,
what they're doing in this case, and what they're doing in this case is they held back the CD that had their computer investigators, analysis of the DASI computer. They held that back. What they did do was turned over basically the entire contents of the computer, right? But not their experts' detailed analysis. So they hand the contents of an entire computer over about a month before Denny was due, less than a month before Denny was due, which Denny is the third party suspect thing that, so about 3.5 weeks before that's due. And they've had all this information for 8 months previous. So a month before Denny's due, a little bit less than a month, they hand this 7 DVDs over that is basically the entire content of the computer, not the detailed analysis that picks out all the bad stuff. And they're saying that that's enough. But I argue, no, you hired an expert, and that expert's analysis should be available to the defense. And so that's one of the things that's going to be getting argued in court.
Good. Because that should have been released during the discovery phase, because that just shows that that's evidence that they're creating with the expert's opinion. And then the defense needs to know what that is. So back to your question about, why the dogs weren't really doing much around the house and why that could be.
Right.
So here's some things that I think it could be. Some of this stuff was planted after the searches were done. Things were moved and then placed and then found later. And so the dogs were brought in. Nothing here. Oh, we're going to find something over here. Oh, the dog kept it from finding it. or Grizz kept it from finding it.
Right.
The limiting the access of the search area around the residence and then blaming it on the dog, I think that's suspicious. And I think that Teresa's vehicle was probably brought in from the other property.
Right.
And then somebody probably walked from that vehicle up to the Avery residence, looked around and stuff. And I'm not sure, but is that when the key was planted from that vehicle? Who knows?
Sure.
It could have been. So someone walking around the F-350 or walking around the garage, then looking at the windows or whatnot of the house, trying to see who's home or if they could get access to it. Who knows?
Right.
We don't even know if that whole scene was locked down and protected during this whole multiple day search of this residence. We don't know.
Right.
I didn't see anything. I mean, you might know. You know a whole much more than I do about this.
They took Cadavor Dog Brutus through the trailer. I remember that there was they did that. I mean,
and if there was a murder inside of that trailer, to the and then dismemberment and all this other crap going on,
throat cutting and
that dog would have had a heyday walking down the hallway to the bedroom. That dog would have been like, whoa, and then got to the door and went, whoa, and then walked around the whole room and went, oh my God, something's in here. Hey, and then should have given a trained final response, because there would have been so much stuff that they couldn't have cleaned up. Looking at the photos, I mean, it didn't look like that place had been gone over and cleaned. They would have had to have pulled everything out, repainted, bleach and scrubbing. And even then the dog would still hit on something they found. A little speck of a brain. I mean, to the point, let me just tell you. So down in Texas, our dogs were hitting on a swab, just like a Q-tip of brain material that was then placed underneath a threshold of a door. So a metal threshold. So that's like just wiped up underneath there. So that teeny little bit, the dog just goes, whoa. There it is. Yeah. So, I mean, that teeny little bit, our dog will find. Well, when I say, so let me just kind of give you a rundown about human remains detection dogs. So when you train a dog to find a dead person, it's not just like, here's that smell, now go find it. There are arguably between 470-ish to 500 and something different smells that the human body releases that are the volatile organic compounds, the VOCs, all of those change during the decomp process. So as the body sits there a little longer, it now smells different from what it did the day before. Now it sits there a little bit longer, it smells a little different because the different chemicals are being released.
Right.
So about 500 of these, the dog has to know, and it has to have exposure previously that this is, human remains. This is what we're looking for, and show me what this stuff is in the future. And the dog will never forget. And so it's like having a catalog. And so the dog gets trained on bones. The dog remembers that. Gets trained on brains. The dog remembers that. Blood, all these different things. And then the whole full bodies. That's why we like going down to the body farm, is so that we can so that we can introduce our dogs to that big of a source, so they don't get freaked out about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, hey there, Scooby.
It kind of shows you, hey, Scooby, Scooby. And so, so you start thinking about, if a cadaver dog that is trained with a large enough category of source cataloged in its nose and its brain, then it should have smelled that. So
sure.
Yeah.
I guess that's another question I had as well, is like, and I guess it goes into the guy you track through the city, where Zoe was probably originally working on tracking scent, maybe on the ground or something, until she got close enough, right, to smell those.
Nope.
In other words, because you found him dead. I'm sorry. You found him deceased.
The police found him deceased like 2 blocks from where we stopped at.
And so you never even made it to that point.
Never made it to the actual point, but she pointed right with her track that it's that direction. So with a thunderstorm, we had to stop. So
she most likely wasn't sensing the volatile compounds.
No, not at all.
She would have been just picking up his scent, his slopping off of skin cells and stuff, right? Right.
Yep.
Okay.
A normal track.
Right.
Yeah, she wasn't close enough to actually smell the body yet. And,
so how? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And so there's usually a question that people ask. Well, how far away can a dog be from a dead body? Well, there you go. I got you. So, how far away from a dead body can the dog be, and then indicate on it? So it kind of depends on the stage of decomposition. So out here in the West, we get mummification. Which is the body, instead of getting putrid and swelling up and then popping and getting all juicy and then having that huge aroma of VOCs out there, the body will just kind of dry up, and it doesn't take very long, a couple weeks. The body's dried up like a mummy. It's from the high altitude, low moisture, low humidity, high sun, high heat. That's what we get out here. So you kind of need to be a little closer for that. But a normal body, I can smell them a lot of times. Sometimes I'm like, I didn't even need to bring my dog today.
Right.
So just to kind of give you a feeling about, burnt bodies or cremains, like some people call them.
Right.
In March of this year, last month, my dog was not indicating, but it was showing interest from 75 yards.
Whoa.
On dead burned bodies.
That's 3/4 of a football field, folks.
Yeah, she's sitting there going, I'm holding her back, and the wind now. So we have to think about, it's not a circle, 75-yard circle around the body. It's a downwind cone. So if you think about the source being the point of the cone, and then as further away you get, the wider it gets.
Fans out a little, right?
And so the wider it gets, the less thick or strong the scent of the VOC.
It thins out, right?
Right. So if you have obstacles, so you're downwind, it's getting big, and then there's a building, right? So then now we're looking this way. Here's the ground is that way, and now the scent goes up and over the building and could transfer across an alleyway and then land on the other side of a building in a pool of eddy of air.
Right.
So your dog could come over to this concrete road that leads right up to a concrete building and go, it's right here. And then you have to go, okay, so let's be smart about this. Where's the wind coming from? Could there be eddying? I mean, there could be a wind effect where the wind is picking it up and then dropping it down and creating a pool of this stuff. Right. So there's all these things, and that's the kind of stuff that needed to be in this report especially when they start talking about the berm and how the dogs were showing interest in the berm, and we brought another dog and they were also showing interest. They did mention about waiting later in the day so that the barometric pressure would come down and the scent would come down as the temperatures dropped to figure it out. But in reality, they needed to do more of a mental thing about, well, where's the wind coming from? Where could this scent be coming from, or where could it have come from? But in reality, on a track like that, it would probably only be about 15 feet in that environment, and probably even 6 feet from where, if she walked down there, where that scent would have transferred. So it would have been real close, because the vegetation would have held it.
The reason why I was asking, because I always okay. Well, I mean, it involves bear, and this is what complicates it. But I've always felt that when Cadaver Dog Brutus exited Stephen Avery's trailer through the door that was closest to the garage and stuff, and they came out, I felt that at that point you are within about 10 feet of that fire pit. When you come out of that door of the trailer, you're about within 10 feet of it.
My dog would have been like, well, hey, I really want to go over there, but there's that dog. But I really want to go over there, but there's that dog.
Right. So
it's all reading the dog. My dog
so your dog would have reacted to bear as well, and would have been.
My dog would have been like, my dog would have been like, why is that dog yelling at me? I don't speak dog, so I don't know what they're talking to each other about. But she would have looked over and said, hey, I really want to go over there, but that dog over there is being a bully. But
so you believe she would have detected those burned cremains, 2/5 of the cremains of Teresa Hallbach? You believe that probably Zoey would have detected it from there.
Now, let's talk about the wind.
Or would have been interested, I should say.
Conditions of the day. Now, if the wind had been blowing from the cremains away from the house for a long, long period of time, and that's not the normal way of it blowing back, there's a reduced chance of that. But if it had stopped, that stuff kind of picks up and it kind of lays down. I'm pretty confident that she would have.
All right, we're gonna find out what the weather was like that day. I do know there was. I don't know the wind. I don't know the wind. I don't know what the wind was doing. I do know at the point when Cadaver Dog Brutus was being brought out of the trailer that there was a slushy rain beginning to fall. So, but I don't know what the wind was like. So I'll try and see what I can find out about that, and we'll see what your
notes of the things we need to
make some notes.
You
can be our researcher. I'm trying to figure out. There's a question here.
But one thing I wanted to add while we're on the trailer, quick, that Brutus did hit on the sink in the bathroom, in the sink. That Stephen Avery said had blood.
Now let's talk about that real quick.
Okay.
So did the dog show interest? Did the dog give a trained final response? Was the dog's nose on that going, hey, what's up? And then wasn't able to do its trained response? I think it was a bark, right? That dog barks.
It was a bark. Yes.
Yeah. So that dog could freely bark if that was what it was smelling. But it could have been, I mean, you talk about a sink. Who here shaves, right? I try not to, but you cut yourself. There's blood that ends up in the sink. You blow your nose. You could have blood in there. So that's kind of one of those things you're kind of going, yeah, okay.
And it's been photographed that there was a little bit of I think a little drop of Jody's blood on the counter somewhere, and I think another little drop of Steven's somewhere. So that actually has been established.
Yeah, it's normal.
Right. Yeah. Well, that kind of confirms that obviously the dog was able to pick up blood. So if there was other blood from something like hacked, sliced, whatever, Brutus would have noticed. So that sort of confirms that whole thing. So.
Hi.
Oh, there's Zoey. What's up, Zoey?
What's up, man?
Hello, Zoey. Hello.
You see these people? He's more like, what are you doing?
Oh, there you go. Oh, there you go.
Okay, and then
he's like, I want to go play. Let's go find some cremains.
Let me answer a question real quick from Pseudo DNA. All right. So this person asked, do pigs and human remains smell the same or similar to a sniffer dog? I hate using that term sniffer dog because a sniffer dog, all dogs sniffer or sniffers.
Yeah, right.
But when search dogs are trained in some countries, or even in some states here in the U.S. where it's illegal to use human remains to do dog training, they'll sometimes use pigs as a human avatar as that. But they've come through recently. I mean, I read something 2-3 months ago that said that very, very, remember those 500 VOCs, the volatile organic compounds? What they're trying to do is we're trying to replicate as many of those in a pseudo source to then have that dog go, yeah, it's similar enough. I'm going to indicate on that.
Right.
But what really happens is that the pigs had very, very little. I mean, if any, that were.
Hold on. Let me just.
Scooby, are you gonna turn her off?
There we go.
So very few of the volatile organic compounds smell the same between the pig and the human. But one thing they did find in this report was that chicken breasts worked better. That chickens had 15 of the 500 and some odd volatile organic compound smells. So they were related. So they were indicating, and they were kind of trying to say that using a dead chicken breast
is better than a pig.
Better than a pig. But there's a lot of opinions about that. There's a lot of research going on about that. I'm not an expert. I'm just the guy who trains the dog, and let those other smart people like Ben Alexander, those guys figure that stuff out.
Yeah, let the brains handle it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not shy of saying that there's people out there that are super, super smart on this, the scientific, details about that stuff. And I've met a lot of them going down to the Forensic Anthropology Center of Texas University or Texas State, and they're brilliant. So, yeah, pretty neat.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up our questions, but we can talk a little bit about Zoe and her favorite toy, since that was my last question. As we get ready to. If you got something else, go ahead.
Yeah, because we didn't really get to the cul-de-sac. You kind of asked me, and then we got off track. I'm sure Zoe jumped up, and we got talking about how cute.
Whatever you want to go back into. Then we'll play with Zoe a little bit at the end, and
Yeah. And so the fact that there was police tape up, 2 deputies protecting the scene, and that they had to call the chief and say, "Can this dog go in this area right here that we're protecting?" Right. And the chief comes back and says no. That's a huge red flag. Because what's that dog trying to find? That dog's trying to find the source, which is Teresa Hallback. And so if they're going to prevent that dog from going in there, that dog should have been allowed to go in there and go right up to whatever they're looking at and go, "Hey, there it is." Right, cool. Now we have confirmation from the dog. We can put the track and we can put the find together and go, they match up. But you can't do that now because you had this whole, no, don't do that. When they didn't let the dog go into the car, the RAV4, they couldn't, the dog couldn't tell the handler what's making me so excited about this car. It could have been something, a dead squirrel underneath the hood of the car. I don't know.
Right.
Could it have been something living underneath the car? I don't know.
Right.
But there's just all these questions that rise up when we don't have that info, and we see that whole oh, don't do this. Don't say anything about it. We're not going to explain ourselves, but we're going to go over here and do that instead. And you're like, well, what about that thing that you were doing? And then there's really no good explanation. The fact that they called, I guess Scooby was saying that they called for an ambulance and they started making a big deal about finding a grave or whatnot. I mean, to me, it's like, why would you not bring Brutus, which is the HR dog, to confirm that is a grave of a human right there? But that would have been what you would have done. Step back and said, send the dog and see what the dog does. If the dog doesn't do anything, then you're going to kind of, let's dig it up anyway. But having the dog hit on that, that's gold. That's gold. You're going to take a human remains dog and bring it out there and then not use it for that?
Well, that's the whole thing too, Jeff, is you're saying that it's normal. It's normal for them to open up the door of the car and let the dog in to go and find the source, right?
If you have legal, if you have the legal right to do that through a search warrant, which I assume at this point they had the right to go through the whole place because they had a search warrant.
Right. They were investigating her disappearance. They had the family's blessing.
No reason they shouldn't have done that.
Right.
No reason at all.
And here's what occurs to me: if they had, they would have not. There would have been. I put it this way: if Stephen Avery's blood was in that RAV4 at that point in time, there would no longer be any question had they let Cadavor Dog Brutus into the car, because he would have obviously went. If Stephen's blood would have been there, he would have pointed to it, and then he would have went and pointed to Teresa Hallbach's blood back in the cargo area. Yep. That's what I envisioned that Brutus would have done. The fact that they didn't want to let the dog in is to me a problem. It's like, what did you want to keep the dog from finding or not finding yet?
Just another red flag.
Yeah. Shari 13608 has a good question.
Okay.
If a body by Cuss Road was buried temporarily, how long after it was removed could a dog sniff out the area?
Okay, so that brings up the whole topic of when does a dead body become a live body become a dead body? Hopefully it doesn't go the other way. Give you a little secret. That's COVID-20.
Yeah, COVID-20.
That's where that's no, just kidding. So almost immediately when the body dies, right, the enzymes and stuff start changing, and at that point is when the dog could go, oh, that's a dead person now. Now,
Right.
Is there still live scent around? Is there still scent from when the person was alive still there? Yeah. So the dog is going to be attracted to that also. And then also the fact that the body has already started to transition. So you give it 5-10 minutes. Now that dog can hit on that and go, that's a dead person. Now you take that person and you put them in the ground and then you bury them up, you dig them up and move them. That dog will still hit on the dirt that the body was buried in, even though the body is gone. I mean, I've worked a case last year where there was a body that had been in the ground for 23 years, and I strongly believe that we found the grave where the body was in there for a period of time. And I don't know if it was scavenged, where the body parts were pulled out by animals and taken away. It's been a long time, and there's a lot of where it was at, but. The tree that was right next to where my dog was hitting, my dog would hit on one side of the tree and not the other side of the tree, because as the tree grew, it sucked up those VOCs into the tree. So the tree smelled like a dead person to the dog.
Right.
And so then the ground area that the dogs were hitting on, because my dog found it, we brought in other dogs, confirmed it. And then we brought the police in, and then they started excavating it. They removed all of the stuff on the top of the surface. My dog still hit the same exact spots. Went through and pulled the dirt out and put it on tarps and went through it. And as we went down, then my dog hit on the dirt and then didn't hit on anything in the hole.
Oh.
But hit on the dirt. So it
Hit
shows
on the pile. Right.
on
Okay.
a pile of dirt. Yeah. And so it's kind of like, can you say 100%? No, but you can go, I have a really strong feeling that was a grave at one point, that the body was there. There were VOCs from
some tiny maybe piece of it that your dog's reacting to is
it's just all of the VOCs that soaked into the ground.
Yeah.
Now that ground is called grave dirt, and you can go to above a grave where someone's been buried, or even carpet where someone has died on. And there's really no like juices or whatnot, and you can use that, and they'll still hit on it. If they've been trained to that level of forensic detection.
Right.
Some dogs, they might see a hand, and they won't hit on anything smaller than that. Zoe's like I wouldn't say she's really good at like the forensic level stuff where it's really teeny stuff.
Right.
She likes to be detailed about that. And then she also does really good at full bodies too. So go ahead, Scooby. What's up?
We could hypothesize that if in fact there ever was some type of human or human remains in that dirt, in that spot, it's possible that a dog trained to that level would be able to detect something today.
Absolutely.
That would be a reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I know some people have been expressing interest in seeing what Zoe can do out there. I know.
It's a long way for me to drive.
That's a long way away, right? Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things. I mean, if people were to chip in for her airfare, she flies on planes, so we'll go out there, and I do it on my off days. We go out there for a weekend or whatnot and can look around. We just need the permission, and then a lot of good pre-mapping and come up with a game plan, and then get it done. But
sure. I know Linda K. Listening's ready to try to line it all up, and she wants to get all the permissions for you.
There you go. But then there's also things too where other locations that could have been where the body was placed. So tell me, how much of her body was located? How much is still missing?
Ultimately, they found 2/5 of the cremains in Stevens burn pit. That's what we have.
Yeah, the estimates vary to,
Well, you have other bones found across the quarries, but according to the prosecution, those aren't Teresa. Well,
Yeah.
until 2011 when they go and give them back to the family. So who knows what's going on anymore? But
less than
Yes,
half.
sir, go ahead.
I think Eisenberg at the trial estimated 42%, 50, whatever, less 50% or less.
2/5. 40% is 2/5. So yeah.
Yeah. We won't. I don't think they know exactly, but right, potentially there's more, I guess is what.
Yeah, it's basically
Okay.
not what it all should be. To put it another way, Jeff, is the way Dean Strang and Leslie Eisenberg talked about it at trial. Dean Strang said typically from a girl, roughly Teresa's size, shape, and weight, you would typically expect the cremains to be just a little bit too much to fill a 2-liter bottle. In other words, to overflow a 2-liter bottle.
Oh, hold on a minute though. To burn it down to that level
After being burned down, after a normal cremation.
Okay, a normal cremation though, which takes hours, and it takes a really, really, really high heat, which is not created by a fire like that.
Yeah.
So a backyard fire in a fire pit is really not going to cremate the body. It's going to burn it down to indistinguishable pieces, but I don't think it's going to make it into complete ash like you would expect. Looking at like an urn from someone who is cremated.
Well, it's another point that we've all made, but because Leslie Eisenberg and the prosecution's story is that these are her cremains, so Leslie Eisenberg explained, you would expect a body that size to fill up a 2-liter bottle. Well, they only found enough to fill 2/5 or 40% of a 2-liter bottle with the cremains that they found. That's what they found. I mean, that's a huge amount less than what should be there. So
it wasn't all necessarily cremains because they had the non-burned appearing bones and the pieces of muscle balls, just all kinds of oddities. But
where's her head? That's where I want to know. Honestly, I want to know where her head is because I mean
they found skull fragments in Stephen Avery's burn pit. Her skull has been it's all cracked up and all that sort of stuff. It's just pieces at this point.
Allegedly. Yeah. With the bullet.
According to Leslie Eisenberg's examinations, correct.
So talking to, let me see if I can point to her. So right there, she was saying that there's a lot of issues with the bones not being confirmed through DNA that it actually belonged to her or that they were actually human. Is that true? Am I remembering that right?
Well, sort of. I mean, it's Leslie Eisenberg first says the quarry bones are most likely human, and she even thinks they may be Teresa's at one point. But just before trial, I personally think because the prosecutors were kind of browbeating her, she ends up changing her opinion and saying those are possible human. And then after, so then at trial, they're all possible human bones. And then here we go after trial in 2011, we have the prosecutors coming in with Dr. Eisenberg's initial reports, using those initial reports to pick out the bones they're going to give back to the family using her early reports. So it's like you have this clear progression of events showing you guys all believe those were her bones to begin with. You guys lied at trial. I mean,
it's like, I think that's hers. Yeah. I don't know if it's a human or not, but it's got to be Teresa's. I mean, it's outlandish.
Yeah, we talked about this too, but you have to wonder about this anthropology too, because these fragments were like, they were saying most of them were less than, a couple millimeter, less than a thumbnail, a pinky fingernail size.
No,
right.
So, and we talked about how normally, and I'm not a dead, I didn't know anything about didn't know nothing about dead people before I started this. I was living them. But
learning a lot.
They talked about if you really, how the forensic anthropologists, when you're dealing with especially burnt things, they really need to do microscopic work to be able to look at the patterns. And you knew about that.
The striations in the bones, and the human bones don't have that. Animal bones do.
With such small things, it's not like you're looking at oh, that's a femur. It's not. I think sometimes people, when you read the reports, they often talk about bones. You're thinking in your head like a bone. They're not. They're little pieces.
Yeah. Right. But now, the thing is what was the mechanical method of reducing the body down to shards per se? because that takes, you know, a lot of effort or a lot of wood chippering, you know.
Right.
I've seen the movie Fargo. You guys up there, wood chipper. But if a wood chipper was used for that, then the dog would hit on the wood chipper,
Right.
or anything like that. So I mean, there's all these little things like how would he have done that? What tools did he use? Because the tools would have been either in the burn pit to burn the evidence off of them, which I would have done if that's the way it was, and then I would have removed it.
Right.
Or they're still laying around like hammers, and I mean that takes a lot of effort to break up a human body.
That's what they're saying that he did, is that somehow in the span of, I don't know, what was it, like about 4 hours, which wasn't enough time, he had somehow burned this body and was using shovels and maybe even had like a sledgehammer out there where he was continuing to just pound on these coals and everything to where he was mashing it all up until it was all little tiny little bits. And that's basically what the prosecution says happened.
Pounding coals squish oxygen out of the burning process, which creates a non-burned layer where things aren't going to burn if you squish them flat. It's got to be puffy and it's got to have air in there to actually burn this stuff.
Right. So then maybe the shovel was more, but you know, yeah. That's their idea, though, that he was just constantly stoking it and doing all those things and continuing to maintain it and get it all burned. And, you know, that's basically the prosecution's theory.
Yeah.
So
they did, just to let you know or remind you, because I know we talked about so much, we have over the past
month or two.
Months,
couple months. Yeah.
But
so
they sent 2 bones, but these were bones from the quarry site.
Yeah.
A long bone and part of a pelvis that they sent to the FBI, and they found some type of saw marks on them, implying, like, I know sometimes, you know, they'll try to saw up the body before the burning process. So,
bodies are heavy, so
yes.
Yeah.
But
I've moved a few.
Those were things that were found in the quarry. So of course those weren't, you know, brought up.
And why would you pull just a few bones and then go hide them in a quarry? Why? I mean, what's the mental thought process there to spread that stuff, you know, like that?
Right.
If he was going to do that, he would have loaded everything up into into something and then got rid of the whole thing together. Just
right.
Or spread it out someone else's yard, you know.
Yeah.
It makes more sense that stuff was getting dropped on the way in to plant it. That's really what makes more sense.
So that's where I'm going with this, is from over on Kirsch Road or the cul-de-sac. To me, from looking at all the dog stuff and kind of just looking at the big picture of it all, it looks like something over there was brought over to the Averys, could have been the vehicle. And then from there, stuff was, you know, maybe people walked up to the house and then walked back out that way, using a different way, because there's multiple ways that the dogs tracked in. And so let's get to a point real quick. One of the things I'm trying to do, like I mentioned before, is to get canine tracking dog handlers to start looking at evidence like footprints. So you have all this paperwork right here talking about the dog went through this area, which is near a pond, or, you know, down this road and all this stuff. Well, it's only been a couple days. The footprints will still be there. Now, that's another thing where the weather report from the time she went missing to the time the dog searched, was it torrential downpour that would have wiped everything clean? Did that happen? Who knows? But even in the mud, there should have been impressions where, you know, someone had walked, if they had walked through there. That's the kind of things that the report's lacking. And I wish that handlers would look at the ground themselves instead of just looking at the dogs, looking for that kind of visual evidence to back up the fact that your dog is actually over here doing something
on a trail,
instead of just screwing around. So,
yeah, definitely.
Like car tracks. Did they say anything about where the tracks from the Avery vehicle? Because you should have still been able to see the tracks of the vehicle pulling into that. Is that
right? Oh, for the RAV4 over there,
right? Yeah. Where did those tracks go?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's off-road, I can track a vehicle off-road by visually looking and seeing the disturbance in the pebbles of the ground as the vehicle runs across it. Even if it's dry, I mean, you can still see if the vehicle went through that way. Nobody even cared to think about it at that level. And that would have, you know, if he did it, and this is all something that he did, then that would have kept all of this whole thing from ever happening. We wouldn't be doubting it. But they left all these holes in the story, and they need to be explained, because possibly you have an innocent man sitting in men sitting in jail right now from these accusations that they honestly haven't proven to me that are true.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, and then Pseudo DNA had a question. So if Teresa was killed on Cuss Road, the dog would smell her scent from when she was alive. Then when deceased, the dog would also smell the scent of death. So if she was brought there in a vehicle, killed in the vehicle, and then the vehicle was then drove over to wherever her body went or whatnot, it's very unlikely that the dog would smell the person inside the vehicle as it was there. If she was outside of the vehicle, a air scenting dog who was looking for her specific scent, a scent discriminating dog, would have been able to smell that scent. Now, if it wasn't a human remains dog, then it doesn't even understand the other part of the picture, which is the smell of death or the scent of death, the volatile organic compounds. It wouldn't even register that because it hasn't been trained to find that. Now, if it was an area air scent dog that then did human remains, then it would be doubly important to the dog to show the handler, hey, look, something happened here, and here's where I'm smelling the scent. Now, whether or not it would give a final trained response based on just the scent being there without finding the body or finding something, an article or whatnot, I doubt the dog would do that.
Well, the thing is, if you look at Zellner's theory, she, after examining the blood spatter on the interior of the cargo, the RAV4 cargo door, she believes that Teresa was on the ground with her head near the rear driver's side corner of the RAV4, and that somebody was using a rather blunt, object, rather large object like a hammer, something like that, and that they were hitting her head, and that was creating the beveling that we see on some of the skull fragments, and that while that was being pulled back, it was throwing blood spatter back onto the interior of the cargo door of the RAV. If that's the case, then there would certainly have been a pool of material somewhere there. Blood coming out of the head, or
True, but unless she was wrapped up prior to being placed into the vehicle, because some people don't want to kill people and they can look at them. So what they'll do is they'll wrap them up, and then they'll hit the object that's wrapped up, and then that kills them. So then after a while, they might have beaten a hole through the wrappings or whatnot, and then that's where the splatter's coming from. Because that would have been an egregious amount of blood coming off of that from a head injury like that.
Yeah,
it would have been more, I think. So could have been a tarp underneath to capture that, but the dog should have been able to smell that blood and then indicate on it.
Sure. Well, there was plenty of blood for the dogs to be hitting on, but
like I said,
they never got let into the RAV4. So
I would have liked to have seen the dog on paper, see the dog, give the opportunity to give to give its opinion.
Right.
So,
yeah. So, all right. Well, I think that's about covers it all. Is there anything else about Cuss Road that you wanted to cover before we start to wrap up?
I'm good, unless other people have questions. So Magilla Gorilla says there's large puddles in photos taken 11/08. I haven't seen that photo to show how big they are.
Well, we'll start getting connected with Magilla, because Magilla and Rule are the guys I've been going live with for the last 7 or 8 Sundays before this. So they're pretty monster researchers. So maybe with all of us together sharing the documents, you can probably get an education from these two. They'll probably be able to throw a lot of interesting things your way. So,
cool. Yeah, if you need anything, let me know. So, does anybody else have any questions at all?
Any other questions, folks?
Magilla says, would love to go track by track.
So there you go. Or that's Pseudo. Wait, no. That was Magilla. So yeah, we can certainly do that. So folks, Jeff will be back for Mammothon, folks. He'll be with us live on Mammothon. So you guys can look forward to that. Maybe I can schedule his and Magilla's segments. I can maybe schedule their segments next to each other, and therefore we can have them overlap a little bit, and we can do a little bit of talking about the dogs. So look at Zoe. Hello, Zoe.
She's like, why do you have me cooped up in this room?
Yeah. What are we doing in here? Let's go find some. Let's go find some remains. I want to play with Tug.
That's what she wants.
Right. All right.
Well, thanks everybody.
Yep.
questions.
Thank you for being here.
Yep.
Thank you for being here, Scooby.
Yep. Thanks, Scooby.
Thank you.
Anything before we go? You want to? Anything else?
More.
No, if you want to check out, you're talking to Scoobs.
But
Scoobs,
both
go
of
ahead.
you. But let's let Scoobs go first because she.
Oh no,
Go ahead.
I was just Jeff. We can because I'll ask you questions later about the DNA and the findings related to that. But that's for another time. That's a whole nother.
Okay.
All right. Well, we certainly got more segments we can do in the future. You know. So.
Oh yeah.
And so thank you for being here,
I'm
Jeff.
so glad to come and join us, Jeff. I really appreciate you bringing.
Yeah, you bet.
Peace and.
Yeah, cool. And again,
everybody.
if people want to donate to the Utah Search Dogs, I mean, it's a volunteer organization. We don't get paid for any of this stuff, and we drive sometimes 6 hours to get to search and do stuff. And we've been busy enough that sometimes we're down at the border of New Mexico, then the next weekend we're all the way up on the border of Idaho. So you're on Facebook. Facebook Utah Search Dogs. And then Utah Search Dogs, I think it's .com or .org. Try either.
Tell you what, folks, I'm going to have him get me the links to those, and I'm going to insert those in the description down below after we're done here.
Okay. And I just wanted to say, because I've gotten to know Jeff a little bit over the last couple of months, and I'm just amazed. And that was one of the reasons I was so happy to get him involved and have him here. By all of this that he does, and people like him, is volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
With Zoey, the search and rescue work that they do, the hours that he puts in every day, the money that he spends to go down twice a year to this body farm, and
to me it's probably $4,000 a trip. So
I mean that's just amazing. I mean that he's a good man.
Yeah, so let's get it. Folks, I know those of you out there that love animals. So I mean, you guys could certainly, consider giving a little help to these wonderful dogs like Zoey that you see there. She looks like such a sweet pup. So
when someone's missing, he can get a call any time of day or night, 24/7, and they'll go out and help. So that's pretty amazing, people.
Oh, here we go. All right. Well, she didn't like that, huh?
She likes to play fight.
There you go.
Yeah, that's my endorsement for Jeff. Yeah.
There you go. Absolutely. Like I said, folks, I'm going to leave the links for those of you who love animals and everything and who I'm sure are tripping over yourselves wanting to help out. I will leave some links down below for you guys so you can do that. So, all right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody out there, for being here in the chat. Thank you for all the questions and the participation. You guys are a big part of this and how this works. Remember, we keep talking about it, and we keep the pressure on. While the lawyers are doing their part, we're doing our part out here in the public sector, and Zoe's doing her part too. So there you go, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.
All right.
Okay,
Take care.
bye, everyone.
Till next time.
Bye. Okay.